Hey guys, welcome back. So with this one, we're getting back into the Venom series, where we now find Eddie Brock and Dr. Doom jumping around through time. But in this jam-packed issue, we get a lot of answers to a ton of cliffhangers and glimpses throughout time that we're shown prior to this point. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get your spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so for this one, we pick up right where we left off, with Eddie finding Doom's time platform so that he could head back to the far future, back to Meridus' garden. But unfortunately, with Eddie finding it, he didn't know how to use it, so he smashed the console until it activated, sending both him and Doom away, with Eddie having no idea of where it would take them. And now when we come back, we get this explanation from Doom about time travel, with him and Eddie traveling into the far past. And in this explanation, Doom goes on to talk about the butterfly effect, and how he knew of this one story called The Sound of Thunder, which was like a time safari. It's about this rich guy who went back in time because he wanted to shoot a dinosaur. And Doom says it's a very American story. Sounds like it. And in this story, the rich guy, he kills a butterfly before it was supposed to die. And long story short, the future was effectively destroyed. But Doom doesn't agree with the author of that story, Ray Bradbury, because Doom believes that events have weight and they can be hard to shift from their courses like worlds or stars. And the truth is, if you want to significantly alter your destiny, then you're gonna have to kill a lot of butterflies. Because if you don't, you just go back to your time and everything will be the way it was, because all you did is what you were fated to do. And as Doom and Eddie crash land here in the far past, Doom goes on to narrate and say that those who use the true method of time travel, the one that he invented, Doom calls this sandbox of fate the cage of events. And Doom is not bound by cages of time, because all times are as one to him, like dirt beneath this iron heel, as Doom steps out of this crater with a butterfly under that heel. And speaking of cages, Doom definitely sees Eddie Brock as someone who's wearing his cage on his back like a suit of armor, which is a fitting analogy, with Clintar being the symbiote word for cage. And for Eddie, who at first is hitting his Terminator time travel arrival pose when the two of them get here, Doom lets Eddie know that they got here in one piece because his platform did all the work. Because right after Eddie smashed the console, the self-repair programs kicked in and it brought them back to this time as an emergency landing, and soon the time platform will repair itself again. But until then, Doom's just like, let's pick up where we left off, because Doom believes that Eddie still needs to suffer the consequences of insulting the hospitality of Doom. And you know what? I'm with Doom on this one, because Eddie just ran up in Doomstad, breaking things left and right. Doom even fed the man, and Eddie turned around and robbed him. And that's not even getting into the extra damage in the library and the laboratory. But when Doom goes to attack Eddie, Eddie reminds him that he has backup as he suits up with the Bedlam symbiote. But Doom lets Eddie know that it's going to take a symbiote far greater than Bedlam to impress him. And as soon as Doom says that, a T-Rex Venom just pops up on him, which now more or less has Doom like, oh, this guy with you? Which for Eddie it's a no, because he's just as surprised as Doom is. But then the V-Rex starts yelling Brock, and Doom just gives Eddie this look like, really? Because he just said he don't know who it is, but this thing is talking and it's saying his name. But really, Eddie has no clue who or what this thing is. And at this point, Doom, he really don't even care no more, because he swore that he was gonna kill a Venom. And if that Venom just happens to be a dinosaur, Doom's fine with that. But while Doom is fighting off this thing, Eddie notices that the time platform has finished its repairs. So he lets Doom know our way out of here is ready. But Doom's just like, our? What you mean our? Because the way that Doom sees it, he's ready to just leave Eddie here in the bed that he made, because he can care less what happens next with him and Venom the last dinosaur. But before Doom's able to go, Eddie tells him that he forgot one thing, and that's the fact that Doom doesn't do well with stretchy guys. So Eddie stretches out all 4 arms at Doom, which to him's like fighting double Reed Richardses. But the reason why Eddie does this, as he breaks the console on the time platform again, is because now he knows that this will just give them a random jump and get them out of there. And as soon as they leave, we find out that this Venom T-Rex is actually Meridus, who we'll see more of in just a little while. But first, with us going back to Eddie and Doom, we find out that they went to France in 1942. And with the way that this is done, it now gives us the rest of the story from Venom issue 22, because it's here where we see a couple of pilots who are transporting Flexo so that he can carry out his secret mission. But along the way, Flexo hears Eddie calling for him, so Flexo ejects himself from the plane as he makes his way to Eddie to answer his call. And if you guys remember back in issue 22, when we got the original story of what happened to Flexo, back when the army requested for the Williams brothers to put him on ice, with the reports saying how Flexo broke out of his containment and went 100 miles away from his target, well, now we're seeing the real story unfold. Cause back then, all we really had was bits and pieces of the story. But now with us heading back and seeing it play out in real time, we're finally getting the truth. Because as soon as Flexo touched down, he looked up and he saw Dr. Doom killing a ton of Nazis while telling them that time itself sent him back to wipe these guys from existence, which is something that not only falls in line with what Doom mentioned before as far as time travel and not being trapped in that cage, which we'll talk more about in a little bit, but also this is showing us that it wasn't Flexo who killed all these Nazis, like the army reports led the Williams brothers to believe. Cause when Flexo landed, he saw Doom. He watched Doom go crazy for a little bit until he heard Eddie calling him again, and Flexo made his way over to Eddie. And we find out that Eddie comes up with this idea of calling the closest symbiote to come to him to help him out because of his recent run-in with that symbiote T-Rex. So with him and Doom coming here now, Eddie's just like, oh yeah, I'm the king in black. If I need a symbiote, I can just call for one. They'll show up and I'll get them to do what I need them to do. And here, the reason why Eddie's calling for Flexo, it's because he's found some civilians who he's trying to keep safe. So he tells Flexo to stay here and keep an eye on them while he goes back to Doom so they can get out of here. And Eddie tells Flexo once he's gone to let these people out and make himself scarce. But when Flexo doesn't respond back to Eddie, Eddie just assumes that Flexo doesn't speak English. So he's like, cool, we'll do this mind to mind. But when he goes into Flexo's mind, he sees a memory of the briefing for the mission that Flexo was sent here by the army to handle, which was pretty much a mission for Flexo to go kill Hitler, which Eddie didn't know anything about till now. So with Eddie seeing this memory, he starts to bug out because he called Flexo over here to watch a handful of civilians, and that one little mistake just might change the course of history. So he rushes to Doom to let him know that they got a problem. And right now we see Doom, who's handling one more of these Nazis. He just tells Eddie not to rush him because now that the time platform has repaired itself again, the two of them can head back to their present day and Doom can get on with Eddie's execution. But Eddie's just like, bump all that. We need to go back and stop ourselves from coming here. But Doom lets Eddie know that they can't do that because it'll just erase them from existence. And he tells Eddie that they are changing nothing because he knows a dead butterfly from a live one. Because this is the past that leads to their present. So whatever Doom does here, it was always going to be done here by him. So right now he's really just playing a role in the cage of events. And he's doing so by choice, gladly, for obvious reasons. But Eddie doesn't fully understand this, so he attacks Doom. And as he does, the Bedlam symbiote hits the console again and they're out of there. And as soon as they leave, Flexo continues his instructions. He leaves the civilians, and he goes on about his way, which then takes Flexo to another moment that we'd seen before. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. But before we do, we first got to talk about Doom and Eddie taking their next trip, which lands them closer to the present day, but not quite, with Doom finding himself at the Latvian embassy, which I believe is in Manhattan, while Eddie on the other hand finds himself over in Queens. Because as it turns out, they were separated, with the time platform exploding at 6,000 feet and the two of them falling in separate yet relatively near locations. And during this downtime, while the platform's repairing itself, we start with Eddie and Bedlam as they're approached by a teenage Peter Parker who saw Eddie as a stranger who needed help, but Peter just couldn't walk by without at least asking if there was anything that he could do. So of course this catches Eddie off guard and he tells him like, wow, you are Peter Parker. And at this point he's not much older than Dylan. Like, this is kind of crazy. And of course Peter's caught off guard too, because he doesn't know how this stranger knows his name. So Eddie tries to tell Peter that he's a friend of Uncle Ben, but Peter's not buying that because he's never seen Eddie come by the house, and when Ben passed, Eddie wasn't at his funeral. But Eddie ends up recovering quite smoothly, because he tells Peter a version of the truth by letting him know that he's the black sheep, he's a screw up, and he is the guy that Peter is not. Which is a crazy oversimplification if I've ever seen one, especially after what we learned earlier in this series about the creation of Knull, predating the dawn of the universe. But from here, Eddie goes on to tell Peter a very generalized story about his history, and how at one point there was a guy who Eddie hated more than life itself, and that hate was Eddie's life, it was his whole personality. and that hate consumed him to the point of doing terrible things. But eventually this guy who Eddie hated, he became an example of what Eddie needed to see, an example of what Eddie could be, an example of what a good person could be. So over time, Eddie started thinking of what he would do if he was here. How would he get through this? What would Parker do? Which right there has Peter thinking that Eddie's talking about his Uncle Ben. So Eddie just rolls with it. He's just like, oh yeah, sure kid. Of course, who else would it be? And this leads to Eddie kind of having a moment with him thinking about where he's at now as opposed to how he was at that time in his life. Because for a long time, Eddie's been trying to take responsibility and use his great power to save a universe of lives, like that could atone for the lives he's taken. But the truth is, Peter Parker never had all the answers, and it wasn't like he was ever a one-to-one map or navigation for Eddie. He's just a kid. And now the way that Eddie sees it, this great responsibility, all it's given him is guilt, and to him it's been nothing more than a curse. And now Eddie just feels like he's done with all of it. But from here we jump back over to Doom for a moment, as he makes his way over to younger Doom, who really isn't all that much different. But it's funny because when the younger Doom sees present day Doom, he initially thinks that it's a Doombot that's just wandering around the place. And younger Doom tells him that there's a second life sign inside the building. Find him at once and destroy him. And it's funny because like you're looking at him, it's you. In present day Doom, he does a voice confirmation just to make sure that he's not talking to a Doombot either. And for the Doom of the past, he knows that none of the bots know this command, so it just confirms to him that he's being paid a visit by his future self. So present day Doom takes a good look at his younger self, and he can tell by the details that he's arrived about 15 years in the past, not long after his failed attempt to blackmail the United States government, and just before his failure to recruit Spider-Man. And this causes the younger Doom to go off a bit, because he tells him if you were actually the future me, you would know that Doom can never fail. So present day Doom just looks at his younger self and he doesn't say anything. Not at first. He just thinks to himself like, yeah, this younger me, he's less experienced, he's seen less, and he's got a hot temper. And finally, when present day Doom does speak, he asks his younger self to place a call to Reed Richards, cause he would be of more use. And that triggers younger Doom right away. And present day Doom isn't even threatened in this moment, cause he knows everything about the Doom that's in front of him with an extra 15 years of experience. Cause he asks his younger self like, how are you gonna get rid of me when I'm everything you are and more? When I am the true doctor, master of all arts, all sciences, all secrets. The full scale of existence would humble you, yet I have humbled it. I've seen the face of God, and it was my own face. Can you say the same, my young friend? Do you even know where to begin the task? At this point in time, have you even saved our mother from hell? Which for young Doom, with him hearing this, it's a lot for him to process all in one moment. So now he just believes that this is a corrupted version of him. So he attacks again, and present day Doom just puts him to sleep. And he makes sure that this younger Doom won't remember anything when he wakes up. Cause if he did, he wouldn't rest until he destroyed his other self, which would make him a very dangerous butterfly. So present day Doom makes his way back to the time platform, and while he does, he just thinks to himself it's a pity, because for him, if a future version of himself appeared on his doorstep, Doom says he would just kneel and obey. But now with the time platform fully repaired, Doom makes his way to go get Eddie. Cause with the way that Doom sees it, Eddie's like a bull in a china shop. And instead of him wrestling with this bull and putting himself through the trouble, he figures that he'll just take this bull to a competing china shop instead. So he goes back to Eddie and he lets him know that it's time for something different. And Doom's aware that Eddie wants his time machine. And even now, Doom's not having it. But by the mercy of Doom, he's gonna take Eddie where he can get another one. Cause Doom knows that he can't stop Eddie from this pursuit. But what he can do is at least steer Eddie in a controlled direction, which from here now has Doom taking Eddie over to Kang the Conqueror, who's someone that Doom would describe as a person who knows the conquest of everything, but the value of nothing, which is something that Kang sees as like the inverse, because Doom only values himself. But when they arrive here on Kang's ship, Kang asks Eddie where he is on his timeline, because Kang remembers training Eddie on how to control his method of time travel, like we were shown in Venom issue 8. And when they get here, Eddie just gets straight to it, and he tells Kang, you know, actually, I came here to borrow one of your time machines. And Doom said it was cool, but Kang just lets Eddie know. For one, he's already taught Eddie how to time travel, using his mind. And if Eddie were to physically time travel, on top of that, things would get cluttered. And Eddie tells him that that's exactly what he's going for. And he was hoping Kang would reconsider since they're such great buddies. But Kang is just like, nah. He lets Eddie know that he's a long way before he becomes his buddy, because Kang has always been his own best friend, as he chrono clones 3 other copies of himself and sends them after Eddie. which right here just merits him a Doom-bastic side-eye. And he can't even hide his expression of contempt, because Doom's like, okay, Kang jumped back in time a split second using his inferior time travel so that he could arrive next to his past self. And then both Kangs jumped again, creating a second new timeline. And Doom just sees all of this as a waste of energy. Like what? This is what Kang thinks conquest is supposed to be? And it's funny because for a while Doom is just watching and he's like, look at this, look, it don't even work. Because these copies are running up on Bedlam and getting eaten, which is kind of terrifying when you think about how each of these copies of him are truly him, but only split seconds to a second time displaced. It's kind of wild. And at first when Doom is watching, he's like, what was the plan? When they were done, were they all just gonna jump back a split second, each returning to their timeline until it came back down to one Kang? That's too much. Ain't nobody got time for that. And with this stupid method getting them eaten, Doom's just like, is this the final destiny of Kang? Cause getting eaten is one way to correct that timeline, and he can only imagine that Kang is at least embarrassed, cause Doom is disgusted. And for a moment, Doom thinks to himself like, why couldn't Kang just make robots like a normal person? Cause it just doesn't make sense to copy and sacrifice yourself like some sort of pawn, when you're really laying down your king, your true self every time. But with Bedlam finishing his meal, which was one of the Kangs just now, who he said has a blue raspberry flavor, which for some reason I imagine is wildly accurate. But this leads to the last two Kangs putting their shields up, only for the original Kang to betray the other, leaving him high and dry to get eaten by Bedlam, which from there just has the original Kang like, you know, don't cry about it, you would've did the same thing to me. And eventually, in spite of Kang's better judgment, he gives Eddie one of the time sleds that was originally created by Reed Richards and used by the Fantastic Four. But in return, Kang tells Eddie to leave him a piece of the Bedlam symbiote, which at first has Bedlam like, nah, that's a trick. But Eddie's in charge and he agrees to do it so they can go on their way. And now with Eddie getting in the time sled, which is a device that's more user-friendly, with Reed designing it so that Johnny could understand it, he makes the trade with Kang and he goes on his way. Which from here finally takes Eddie to the destination that he'd been trying to physically reach since issue 21, with him heading into the far future and making his way to the Garden of Meridus. And the crazy thing is, when he arrives here, Eddie lands in the same moment where the first version of him tried to save Finnegan from the previous Bedlam. And Eddie comes in hot, crash landing on Meridus' head. And I like how these other Eddies, like Wild and Turo, who have seen this moment from multiple perspectives, react, because they're thrown off when this happens. Because each time that they've seen this moment, there wasn't a time sled crashing down on Meridus. And some of them have experienced this 2, 3, 4 times without seeing this extra Eddie show up, or Eddies for that matter, because there's also an extra Bedlam here now too. But after seeing this, we then head back over to Doom and Kang, because Doom decided that he's gonna stick around for a while, if for no other reason than because he's curious. Because he asks Kang, why did he want a piece of the Bedlam symbiote? Because Doom knows that Kang has access to other symbiotes. But in response, Kang lets Doom know that none of the others are like this one, and Kang has a special role for this little rascal to play, which could be a Red Goblin tease, or it could be nothing. Who knows? But it's here where Kang explains to Doom how he believes that Eddie's travels to the garden in the far future initially has created a timeline that is just tangled up. And as for the Eddie who just left, because of his experience in Limbo, this has caused him to become a rogue element outside of that tangled loop. So now, as the Eddie who just left, the rogue element Eddie who just left, as he heads back to the garden, Kang believes that Eddie is heading to an alternate future that is something like a pocket dimension. And if he repeats this attempt, he'll only be creating new alternate futures that'll also always have been there in a 5D space. And Kang believes that the same goes for Meridus and Bedlam, all of them, all the Eddies. And Kang tries to say like, oh, well, I know this is going over your head. But with Doom hearing this, he expresses even more contempt as he tells Kang the Conqueror that he's wrong. And Doom just goes on to explain that it's simply an application of Grimwood's law. Non-Doom-locked time travel cannot create alternate pasts. And it's more complex in this instance because these alternate pasts are being created in Brock's future. But it all fits within the established laws of time. And with Doom saying this, he expresses a bit of disappointment. And he tells Kang like, man, I thought you had something new to show me. But when Doom says, oh, of course, you'll never be the true master of time without adopting a greater degree of magical thinking, which will of course evolve your mindset, evolving you into your older and wiser self. Immortus. And the whole time Kang is more or less like, stop, don't you say it. And he tries to shoot Doom, but Doom's already gone at this point. But before Doom makes his way back to the present, there's two places that he needs to go, with the first destination being weeks ahead of the present day, in New York, where Doom is scanning for two specific symbiotes. And when he gets here, he sees a great conglomeration of symbiotes here in battle, which he describes as a Venom war. And though there's a number of ways that this fight could go scientifically, magically, Doom sees two paths laid ahead for Eddie Brock, because on this day, Eddie Brock will either be saved or damned beyond salvation, which now has Doom like it would be a shame if someone were to choose which of these two truly lie ahead for Eddie, which from here takes us over to Doom's second destination in 1942, just moments after him and Eddie left Flexo, in what for Doom was just a matter of hours ago. Roughly, because we really don't know how long he was there listening to Kang. But this time, with Doom returning to the past and approaching Flexo, this is the same moment that we got a glimpse of at the end of issue 22, when Doom gave Flexo that long speech about how when the time is right, Flexo is going to be the hand of vengeance against Eddie Brock. And with doing this, Dylan is going to be Flexo's weapon, which now brings so many things into perspective, with us discovering how Flexo even recognized Doom, as well as what Eddie was calling Flexo to do back in 1942. And on top of that, the reason why Eddie and Doom were even there to begin with, which, I mean, yeah, it's a lot to break down and digest, but with the way that this series has just been evolving and unfolding, it's been keeping me at the edge of my seat, and I can't get enough. And so now real quick, I'm going to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can head over to patreon.com/dopesville. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.